I love how we switched to 9 p.m. and then just never went back.
After the initial kickoff, it's been, yeah. I can't complain, we were out early.
Yeah,
Oh, you weren't here? Oh, yeah, you weren't here, yeah.
Stalking Carrie's OneNote as she was taking care of.
she was tracking Gary's notes. That's
Oh, really?
that's awesome.
They document like that.
What's the?
Got back down to the Saco, Biddeford area. Their grocery store was closed at 9.
Yeah.
So I was like,
When I first started, I was like organizing.
Good evening. We're just slightly past 6 o'clock, our starting time.
I lasted like 2 weeks.
Welcome to all of you. Sorry I'm a little bit late, but I had to be at another meeting. And in fact, it's still there, and I suspect that Rick Whiting, after he finishes there, will be here as well for this meeting. So a reminder again, as I spoke last time, but just a reminder, please be mindful to have the microphones close to you and to speak into your microphone. Really important for anyone who is watching us online, live, and also important for the record and for the person who has to do the minutes. So appreciate your help with that. Before we begin the roll call, I've been informed that Bruce Rio is not able to be here, and Dennis Bergeron is not able to be here this evening as well. Those are the only two that I'm aware of, and as I said, I think Rick will be joining us hopefully shortly after the library board meeting is done. So with that, we can start with the roll call. Make sure we have attendance. Rex, I'll start with your end.
Rex Rhodes.
Riley Bergeron.
Jeff Harmon.
Matthew Duval.
John Cleveland.
Dana Staples.
Paul Jacques.
Bilal Hussein.
Jane Costello. Becky Conrad.
Phil Kroll, City Manager.
DeCarlo Brown, Planning.
Lauren Cafe.
Allie, Toby, very done.
Great, welcome to all of you. The next item on the agenda is the minutes. These are the minutes from July 28th. Are there any additions or corrections to the?
Yeah, there's a typo on the third page, first item, Broad South Maine Vickery. It says a Vicky area.
Thank you, Matt. Any other typos or corrections? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to accept the minutes as corrected by Matt.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand. Unanimous. The next item on the agenda, and I'll note for the record that Tim Cowan has just joined us as well. We'll put him as present.
John, if you could speak into your mic a little more, that would be great.
Speak
Really
into-
bring it, yeah.
Just don't go left or right.
It's just about in my mouth. How much closer do you want it?
I-
Can you see any more space between here? Is that close enough?
I have about 2 inches.
Jeez. Maybe I'll speak louder. Maybe that would help. But thank you for letting me know every word isn't being heard from me. Next item on the agenda is the public comments section. Allow an opportunity for any member of the public to address the Comprehensive Plan Committee in regards to issues or questions about the comprehensive plan. So I'll open it up to see if there's any member who wishes to speak to the Comprehensive Plan Committee. Noting that there are none, we'll close the public comment section. Okay. So, that brings us back to where we left off at the last meeting, which was we're in the process of reviewing the draft comprehensive plan. I think at the last meeting, if I remember correctly, we were able to go through all of it at least once, quickly. Well, for a couple hours, wasn't that quickly, I guess. So how would you like to proceed? Some folks weren't here, I think. So I want to do this in a way that is as effective and efficient for you as possible. We can start from the top of the plan and kind of work our way through, see if there are other comments. Maybe for a moment, you did get some emails from Lauren, and you know the staff has been doing some work, editing work. Maybe just quickly summarize what the staff has been working on.
Yeah, I can do that. So the largest of the edits that staff have discussed and with Barry done as well is structural changes. And so particularly with the introduction of the plan, working through the best way to settle the reader into this big of a document. So we'll have an introductory letter from the mayor and city manager, as well as an executive summary. That's a common thing you see in other comp plans. And then move into the introduction. What is a comp plan? Then vision statement, and then the introduction, and kind of building on a history and the planning process into that introduction. There were other few places, namely with formatting and just flow, when there's chapters and sections and kind of headers and things, so a little bit of copy editing there. Those were the bulk of the edits that staff had made. Content-wise, there's no additions. There is one that we can talk about with the agricultural, forestry, open space, and recreation land use category. I'd say that's a content change. Or direction shift slightly, but other than that, that's what staff has been working on so far.
Okay.
And if
Yeah.
anyone has any questions, yeah.
Yeah, I guess in regards to the staff review, has the staff completed their review? Okay.
Yeah. And we also sent it to directors as well for their comments and feedback. We didn't receive a whole lot, and they were in alignment with what the comprehensive plan committee had talked about, and also with planning. So
Good. Yeah, that was a good step. Thank you. So with that, is it pleasure of the committee? We'll start from the beginning, see if there's any comments or questions or any changes you think need to be made. First section is the introduction. Explains what a comprehensive plan is, how to use this plan. Talks a little bit about the history of planning in Auburn, where we are today. So gives a summary of where we are with some information, primarily from the inventory area. If I go too fast, just stop me at any time. Next section is the planning process, and it talks about the inventory and analysis section. It talks about our extensive community engagement and visioning for the plan. Talks about the future land use plan. The section that deals with policy objectives and actions. The implementation section. and describes the final plan. As you can see, looking up, that, there is good visuals here, nice pictures. Next section out describes the community engagement, and I think, if I remember correctly, a question was asked last time, would the ongoing community engagement be included? And the answer will be yes, that will be. So that'll be added to the community engagement section. And you can see it's been quite extensive. There have been more than 2,000 engagements during this process so far. It gives you a slice of some of the comments that community members made in their quotes in this section. This is important, of course, because we're trying to use a community engagement process to construct a plan that hopefully fulfills where the community feels they wish to see the City of Auburn go in the next 10 years. The next section is the vision for the community, and as a vision statement. Then it had, Dana, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I guess Lauren mentioned the staff wanted to have an executive summary. Would that be before all of this introduction? Okay. And then do you envision anything in this? I mean, the introduction, as far as I'm concerned, is about 25, 30 pages. Are you envisioning anything else changing in that section from the staff review?
From the introduction, I think parts of the introduction will move into the executive summary. The executive summary would probably be about a page or two. Allie and I are actually meeting more tomorrow to go over page count and so on. But I think there'll be some information that's repeated from the executive summary in the introduction. There'll also be the addition, if you scroll up, Allie, to like the end of the introduction. So here we have a section on Auburn today, and we'll also add a section about Auburn tomorrow. But there's some language in here that talks about Auburn tomorrow, and so it's more just making clear distinctions as you're moving through the introduction of what we're talking about. So I don't see any major word additions or page additions.
Thanks.
Just improving its usability and clarity and structure. All right, so we have the guiding principles: resilient, connected, welcoming, and intentional. Then from that, we have the beginning of our goals for the major sections.
And I'll just add, sorry, John, that this vision statement will move before the introduction, so that the foundation of the plan is at the beginning instead of at this point.
Oh, you're going to be locate that. Yep. Okay.
One question.
Goals are in 8 main areas. There's a goal for land use, a goal for a general category called community that would include arts and culture and education.
Tim, did you have a question for me?
Oh,
No problem. Well, I'm thinking about it, and don't forget it. Do you have a plan, once this is finalized, to add in links, electronic links from chapter to chapter?
Yes, I think so. In the table of contents?
Yeah.
Yes, I think they
Yeah.
exist now.
Or from
So-
pieces, key places in the report to say, learn more, blah, blah.
Like hyperlinks to different plans and other documents. Yep, we can certainly work those in.
Good notes.
okay, good.
Can I just clarify? So the vision is the whole vision section, those 3 pages?
So finishing with the goals, transportation, natural environment, the economy, housing, infrastructure, parks and recreation. Those are elaborated on in more detail further on in the plan, which brings us to the next section, which is the future land use plan. And this is the area where, in addition to the narrative, there is mapping that indicate the various land uses in the community where those are located.
John, I can speak to some staff conversations about this section a little bit, if that.
Sure, go ahead.
So some staff thoughts for this future land use plan, this beginning part, is to condense the language a little bit to make it clear and concise. With the recent state legislation, that will also be a shorter, more clear, concise section. And then with the growth areas, they'll be on page 29. It'll be broken up by high density, moderate density, and low density or low growth. And then the principles for each will be under that section. So instead of description of them and then the principles, that was how that reordering we thought would flow a little easier.
Yes, and certainly the recent state legislation support area, because the legislature has passed laws that definitely mandate certain land uses. And so we've been mindful of that and incorporated that into our comprehensive planning. I won't go the other areas. Of course, you see the map graphic of where the growth area map is. There's a map of the natural resources. And there's a narrative that explains these various maps. There's a map that shows public spaces in Auburn.
I can talk a little bit about that because we had a good conversation last Tuesday.
Yes.
And so we thought it would be best, given the complexity of conservation, open space, and park and trail system, to do a narrative and then point to the inventory and analysis where we talk about parks, trails, and open space. So that's that data point that you had, Tim, without confusing the reader of why we're having this map here. So we'll just have a narrative piece about open space in the high growth areas in the future land use map.
Just one question about the natural resources map. Is it worth actually clipping the layers to just Auburn for that? Because there is still stuff outside which looks a little strange. So a little GIS clip function might do some.
We did talk about that.
Yeah. Carlo, did you?
So yes, we did talk about that. The issue is that when you're doing development on those parcels that are right next to Auburn, some of our requirements is that if the parcel next to you has those resources, you have to do things on your site to preserve those. And so this was, in looking at the map itself, so this wasn't it, it's the other one that we were just looking at. It shows the interconnected system right outside of Auburn. And so then it's the question of which features to then take out of this map. And the vast majority, over 90% of them, they're directly bordering your jurisdiction, except for that small little green one next to the corner on the left side, that one right there. But the other ones are a part of an interconnected system. And so for our purposes, it tells people of, okay, this is a part of a larger system. These lines are the lines that we've drawn for our jurisdiction, but you are a part of a larger environmental system.
Got it. Thanks for the clarification.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
along those lines, is there opportunity right in the map or very close to the map to put the summary you just said, you know, that the reasoning for that. So I think there's a key, that's a really important message.
We can add that in narrative form, and I think with the edits, plan to pull the narrative piece above the map as well, so you're reading this before looking at the map too, but can certainly add a sentence or two about this interconnected kind of natural environment system.
My experience is people skip text when they can go to maps and graphs, so.
I think one of the things we're trying to accomplish as well here, you'll remember from our conversations, that though when we were doing land use categories and areas, even though there might have been a growth area, let's say, but there were recreational areas or parks or cemeteries or trails, trying to convey as well that those areas are special areas to be protected as well, and even though they don't come with their own necessary land use category, we have been mindful about those. And that would be things like floodplains and shoreland zoning, that kind of natural habitat protection. So it's trying to show that we're mindful of these things and are intended that they should be considered going forward in the process of land use zoning and development regulations. So you have a map that shows the various land use categories that have been described, or that will be described. And it goes to each one of those with a map showing where they are. Begin with high growth areas, high density areas. And for those who weren't here, there's some nice figures or diagrams that try to illustrate what the mass and size of would be or may be in those particular categories. Obviously, the ones that are more high density would be higher mass, larger forms. Those that are lower density would be smaller, low growth. Shows the map where the high density cores are that we've discussed, those three general areas in the community. Next section's the downtown. It shows a design scenario for the for a type of a downtown structure. Shows it where it's located on the map of Auburn. Then we have mixed-use corridors, and it shows in a design scenario there. Describes it in the narrative, and it shows it on the map, where those would be located. These are individual maps that show them individually, so they stand out. You can see them quite clearly. The next category is mixed-use neighborhood. Shows again a design potential design scenario for mixed-use neighborhood and potential density of that structure or form. Shows where they're located in the community. Next is compact residential. Follows the same scenario there. Shows it on the map. Next is the industrial. Shows has a narrative and a description, a design scenario showing what that may look like. And also shows it on the map where those would be located in the community. Then you move on to your moderate density areas. And you follow the same pattern here. Shows where the moderate density growth areas are on the map, has narrative about it. One of the moderate density is neighborhood transition zone. Describes that, gives some illustrations of what that may look like. shows the locations on the map. And it has residential corridors or out in the rural areas. This is lower density, shows a scenario of what that may look like, and shows on the map where those are located. And there's low density area land use categories. Shows those on the maps. Those are agricultural resource protection type areas and the watershed protection areas around Lake Auburn. It's low growth areas.
John, we can jump in now and talk about the staff proposed change
Yeah,
for
this would be a good place to do that, yeah.
the agricultural, forestry, and open space and
Yeah.
recreation land use category. And this change pertains to the description portion, and I'll pass it to Carlo to explain a little bit.
Yes, so you have industrial uses in your agricultural zones, such as sawmills, processing and storage of compost from your sanitary fills. And one of the requirements for zoning is that after you pass a comprehensive plan, your zoning must become compliant with that new comprehensive plan. And so this was just an effort to ensure that when we are making sure that our zones are compliant with that, someone can't go back to the agricultural description and say, well, absolutely, it doesn't say that you can't do any industrial uses or processing and things like that. But to put a little bit of security that, yes, we're allowing some industrial uses, but they're related to agricultural and forestry and related commodity production and other rural resource-based industrial areas, just to limit that scope of the industrial uses that we were referring to.
Did you elaborate on the industrial type uses that you wanted to make sure were included?
Sure. So currently in our zoning ordinance, we allow several industrial uses in our agricultural district. And to name a few, and this is the wording that's in the current ordinance. It's not. Slaughterhouses are sawmills, mushroom cultivation, and you may want to add processing if you're doing cultivation of mushrooms, and that is it's an intense use. Being from the Pennsylvania area, you can smell it a mile away, so that is an industrial use. And then you have processing and storage of compost from municipal sanitary. So these are industrial uses that you have in your agricultural area, and you want to make sure that that you're able to continue those if that's the will of this body. If not, then I'd say you can limit that even more. And your current language is okay, but if you do want those type of industrial uses to continue, my recommendation is to add some language in there to just ensure that if someone is saying, doing a consistency check, that you're able to do those.
We're going to pull up that language too on the screen. I sent an email yesterday to y'all, but just so you can see it here. So give us one moment.
Yeah. You'll recall, I think, that Lauren sent you that language in an email as well. But pull it up on the screen, I think. Lauren sends numerous emails. She's very good about communicating. But sometimes you can't find the exact one you're looking for because it's in the pile there
So
somewhere.
many of them, yeah.
Jane?
Yeah, I was just, I read the email that you sent and the variations in the language, and I just found myself uncertain and wanting to know what the people on our Ag and Natural Resource Committee might have to say to it. So I had a very brief conversation with Kathy Shaw, but I don't know, I mean, that would be really helpful to me because there are people who are kind of more thinking about these things.
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, so Jane, I had long conversation, actually 2 conversations with Kathy about this, and she's also provided this to the Ag Working Group. So they're gonna look at this and get some feedback. I think that it's important that there's some conversation about what the purpose of this is, like DeCarlo has just provided us, that we're trying to align this with the current understanding, because it can be a little disconcerting if somebody just reads this sentence, part of the sentence that says other rural resource-based industrial uses without the context. So, but they are gonna give us feedback on that.
Yeah. That was my, oh, quick, go ahead.
I wanted to point out, I was on the planning board when we had a joint meeting, it might have been a couple of meetings, with the town of Poland for the bark mulch plant. And this is the type of industry that would be covered by that. We have it existing in place. It was very controversial at the time. They have grinders. It can be noisy. Most of the operations in Poland, it didn't affect Auburn as much, but we had police presence. We had somebody, I think we had to meet at the middle school because there were so many people concerned about it. But it was approved, and now they actually do recycling for the city. That's where you bring your old wood and bark and whatnot, and they turn it into a compost or bark mulch, whatever. So it does provide a service, and it's related to wood products that we have in the area. So, but, you know, there is a downside. There's, you know, some control issues, noise issues that the city has to monitor.
Yeah, my observation as well is, if when you hear the context, you say, yeah, those are the kinds of things that a rural area would accommodate or would be natural for them. Finding the right words are the challenge.
Yeah.
Maybe we can think a little bit about that, because other rural resource-based industrial uses, maybe that's the best we do, but maybe there's some, we can improve on that a little. Dana?
I wish I'd thought of this before the meeting, but it just happened to occur to me that we have a very extensive outline as to what constitutes a bona fide agricultural use, and I just want to make sure that this aligns with that. And it probably does. I just hadn't thought to check it before this meeting.
Yeah.
I did take a look at that, Dana, so thank you for mentioning it. Thought came to my mind as well. The bona fide uses are more related to, related specifically to agriculture and farming, and what's a primary and what's a secondary. Also related to recreational uses, forestry uses, and mineral extraction, mining kind of activities. But some of these are ancillary or part of agricultural use. If you're processing some agricultural use, so it's in a marketable form, that's part of agricultural. Having a sanitary spreading of materials is not, it doesn't jump to your mind immediately, but it's one of the uses that is listed. So I don't think it offends that bona fide use. It's just these other parts where you're processing materials that may come from an agricultural background or an agricultural source. So, as DeCarlo and Lauren has described, that's what, do we object to those kinds of things that we said, would be generally the kinds of things that you would see, or do we feel they're not consistent with that agricultural back area? Jeff?
Yeah, to follow on to that, I think it's, in thinking about this, you need to think about how the pieces fit together, right? Because here in the comp plan, one of DeCarlo's first point was that zoning can't be adverse to the comp plan. So this statement needs to be broad enough so the types of activities that have been discussed over the past 5-10 years that are currently allowed wouldn't be cut off, right? Because as an example, there's been ongoing discussions about trying to get a food processing facility going in the ag zone. Well, without some change, this original language wouldn't allow that. So you'd get into the zoning piece and you'd say, okay, somebody wants to have a food processing facility. Well, you can't have that in your zoning because it's adverse to your comprehensive plan. So here, this needs to be broad enough of an umbrella so that when we get into the zoning piece and describe with specificity the types of activities that are allowed, that they'll fit under that umbrella. This doesn't define everything that you could possibly do. We'll get to that in the zoning. And to John's point, the bona fide piece is tied to what's described in the zoning regulation as an allowable ag or natural resource use. So again, it's important to think through this in the context to make sure that people have an understanding of the applicability of the language here in the comp plan, but that they also don't extend it too far to think it has to specifically say everything that's going to happen in that area.
Jane?
So as I was reading and thinking about this, I was remembering another change that we made that I think is reflected here when we talked about industrial zone. And in that we made a wording change to allow for agricultural processing in an industrial zone. So I found myself, I don't necessarily have a strong argument here, but I was just struck that the two categories are kind of coming close to each other because of the ways that we made those changes. But obviously, the ag zone ought to remain predominantly agricultural. So when, if agricultural facility, or if production facilities or processing facilities are allowed in the industrial zone, why would you need to have them in the ag zone? Unless there was something about a specific case that you needed to have it basically on site. I don't know, and that's probably, I don't know, I was just kind of remembering that we'd sort of been slightly easing the boundaries between the two.
Yeah, so what I'll say to that is that, yeah, your boundaries have been. And so this is one of the situations that we're trying to describe a situation of how your areas currently are. You do have some farming in your industrial land, some conversations that you've had deeply over the past time that we've been here, the dairy farm that we've been discussing. And on the other side, in your ag zone, you do have some industrial uses that you traditionally have that haven't been directly related to just agricultural production, but they've been at a scale that has been rural in scope, right? Which is the difference between the two, and maybe needs a little bit of work from the planning side of going like, hey, the ag zone is about the rural scale and predominantly agricultural land, where you can do some farming uses and farming processing in the industrial zone, and that those can be closer to each other and other types of uses, because those type of areas, land use areas, are predominantly for that that industrial processing of all types, including agricultural, that type of thing.
Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Overall, I appreciate you guys catching this. I think it's an important issue. In concept, I like the idea of making sure we're providing that specificity, not too specific, as Jeff pointed out, of course, but to be able to highlight what's currently there. I think of you might have an agricultural processing plant in our industrial area. I would think it would be economically disadvantageous to have a sawmill that was in the industrial area where you had to ship your log, right? So I think we need to make sure that we are putting in that language to make sure that we're not unintentionally creating a barrier for people to continue business or add to that. So I don't know what the actual wording should be. I imagine you guys are looking at other comp plans and looking at some standard language, and we'll find what you can. The final thing that I would say is, and I'm hearing an English teacher telling me parallel structure. So one of the things that perhaps might make it a little bit less concerning to people is that the phrase other rural resource-based industrial uses is at the end instead of tagged on to agricultural, forestry, and related commodity production and processing and other rural resource-based industrial. To me, that we're talking about a business issue that could be better tied to the other points in here you've already stated that are business related, as opposed to natural resource protection, recreation, and open space preservation.
And we're expecting to hear input from the Natural Resources Committee?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the main reason we brought this up is to bring it to your attention that, we want to ensure that you weren't intending to exclude the industrial, some of these industrial uses in the ag zone. But we've gotten your feedback, and we will continue to improve.
Okay. So there's this and perhaps 2, 3 other things that I'm sensing is going to come back, and I'm sensing a September 9th meeting here. We'll just tag on to
Yes.
this, and let's cover this again with the additional information we may have. Becky?
To Jeff's point, and as you do the research, which I think is really important, I know there's some folks on those committees that are really forward-thinking, and there are future uses around agriculture that we haven't thought about yet. So I would just make sure that we don't stop ourselves today and not be thinking 10 years down the road, because I do think we want to make sure we can encourage because I think we're conflating two things, agricultural and rural, and I think we want to keep it rural with agriculture. But there may be folks who are already thinking about what that looks like 10 years down the road.
Thank you, Becky. Good point. Are we ready to move on? Again, you have your maps of the agricultural, forestry, open space, recreation areas. Then we move on to drinking water protection. This is around Lake Auburn. And these are the protections. Lake Auburn, of course, for everyone who's familiar with this, knows that that is the drinking water source for Lewis and Auburn, Poland. And the importance of protecting that open water space for the future. So it describes the intent to do that, shows a map where the watershed is around the lake. It needs to be protected. There's already current ordinances that do this. This reflects much of that. Then in the next section, we're going into the goals, policies, and objectives. And this is the section that we get more specific about how specific activities, what specific activities will take place to accomplish that. It gives you a sense of the framework and the structure of that. And that, those goals, policies, and objectives apply to each one of those goal areas that we've discussed. It's structured by providing a policy for that one or more policies with objectives listed underneath them that become more specific. You'll see that this has been separated from what we've seen in the past. The action items are in the implementation section further on. But this provides a real direction in regards to how the goals are going to be implemented through policies and objectives. Associated with this is some brief summary of what we heard in these sections from the public in our public engagement. So it ties it back to what we heard from the public in regard to these areas. So it goes through the policies and the objectives here. And then it comes to the next broad goal item, community. And this include a broad range of things in the community: public safety, education, culture, arts. And again, it lays it out in the same format, giving you a policy with specific objectives. In this case, we have a number of policies, I think 5. Also, again, ties it to what we heard from the community in these areas. Goes through each of those policy areas. This language should be quite familiar to you, having gone through it when we did this policy goals and objectives section. The next section is the housing. We've heard a lot about housing. That's a big issue. Affordability is a big issue. Choice of different kinds of housing for all age groups is an important area for the community. Lays out the policy there. Tells us what we, reiterates what we heard, shows the graphs and response from the public and what they were looking for. And it goes through the policies with each of the objectives and some narrative of what the intent is.
John, Ally, if you hold right there, I'm wondering if, to get to Councilor Duvall's point last meeting, sometimes you have to scroll back up to see what policy you're on, and some of these are like 5 policies long. You might be a couple pages in.
Yeah.
We really have room in the heading where it says policy 1. If that said, if this was the transportation section, could that just say transportation policy 1, transportation policy 2? Then you're not wondering what section am I in every time you scroll.
That's a good point, Phil. Yeah.
I think there's plenty of room in that header to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Could add it to this heading up here, so that as you scroll through each of the pages, here
The other
you know that you're in transportation, or this is economy for this example. We can certainly do that, and then have that at the top so you know that where you are across those pages.
Yeah, that's a good observation, Phil. Thank you. I think that might have been mentioned before as well. I'm scrolled down to the economy section now.
Sorry, John, just to follow up on that, Ally. I'm wondering, I like the idea of putting it in the header, but I'm wondering about potentially having the goal on a second line as opposed to it continuing on what's there, goals, policies, and objectives, but somehow different, because goals, policies, and objectives carries through all of the goals. So just, as you were looking at that, or maybe it's different color and its goal equals whatever. Yeah.
So we have the goals listed on the cover page here. Do you want those pulled down into these tables?
Either in the, I think either way. I think Phil's suggestion, you could potentially say economy policy 1, or you could put it in the header, but if you put it at the end of goals, policies, and objectives, what's currently in the header, it could easily get lost and not noticed by the reader. So I'm just thinking, as you're looking at it, working on it to maybe you put that at the beginning of that header. But I just think as you're looking at that, just to really have it pop out. I think if you put it in the header, I'm fine with having it in a header. I'm just thinking it has to be distinctive enough. Like that.
So it would be something maybe more like that. Lauren and I can work on what that looks like, but just having more of a call out for we're in the economy section, and that would carry through each page here. So this would say economy next to it, economy. And then this section for transportation would go goals and objectives, transportation.
This is the broader section of goals, policies, and objectives, and this particular set of pages is for the economy goal. So it's almost economy goal, header, policies, and objectives. I mean, play around with it, but I just think it's it's a really great point that we want to make sure people understand, okay, where am I now? Just want that to stand out.
What Tim is getting at is a hierarchy of type. So we know the most important thing to know where you are, to Phil's point, is that this has to do with the economy. And so if that's the most important thing, then it needs to be has a sufficient hierarchy that, hey, we're in this section for the reader to go through.
Okay, take a look at that, see what you can do. Jay?
Yeah, I guess this is maybe a similar kind of a question about the structure and the order. So we've gone from community to housing to economy. Did you think about how you were putting them in order? Because when I just went back to the page where you have all the icons, and I mean, they're a slightly different order there. And you could make the argument that economy would come before housing, but I don't know. I mean, if it's random, it doesn't matter, but sequence does imply a certain hierarchy.
So we can update that goals graphic to match. The sections are currently in the same order as they are in the implementation plan, which was thought through and reviewed and put together. We can update that structure if it makes sense to move anything around, but that we can update that initial goals graphic to match the structure. Probably left to right down through.
Yeah, that may be helpful as well, trying to keep a clear, consistent structure.
Sorry, one other thing, and then I'll let you guys you can do it, but you have these great icons. So that's another potential thing to put in to have it continuous in the sections.
I like that.
Yeah.
I was at the economy section. In structure is the same, except it's the economy section. as your policies and objectives with narrative. Not a very long, Dana? Yeah.
All right, so I've done a lot of web design, and now I'm wondering, do we need to have the deliverable of this comprehensive plan be a printable document, or can it be a web page? Because if it was a web page, then you would just have a header that just scrolled with everything else, and you wouldn't need to add a header to every single page like that, you know? I don't know, just a thought.
This is a policy document, so it does have to be in print. So you would need to keep in mind how it appears in print. Print first. Yeah, that's what we'll say about that.
If you want to make us a website, Dana.
It's easy enough.
So I'll just summarize what we heard. I think we'll align the goals, policies, objectives header on the right side of the page and have the goal in a very visual way on the left side of the page with the icon as well. And that'll be on each page. Because sometimes the goals, policies, objectives switches from the right to the left side, so we can just align it on the right. We have space above.
They're pulled on different pages. The thought was that if this was a 2-page spread, like in a book, the headers are on opposite sides and not the same side, but we can be consistent in having economy on the left, goals, policies, objectives on the right, and have that be the same going through each page.
Yeah, I think that accomplishes what many members have been talking about. Next section going forward is transportation. And not to be repetitive, but the layout and structure with policies and objectives and narrative is the same as before, specific to the topic area. Four policies within the transportation area. Natural environment, the next one. I have 4 policy areas there with objectives under each of those. Also includes what we heard from the public and how this goal achieves the 4 areas of resilience, resilient, connected, and welcoming and intentional. Next section is parks and recreation. There's a couple of broad policies sections here with several objectives under each one of those policies. Information about what we heard from the public and more details about each of those policy areas with some narrative. Next section is infrastructure. Has the goal, has policy. There's one broad policy here with 3 objectives and how it achieves the goals. What we heard from the public about infrastructure, and then more detail about each of the policy, about the policy in this one. Then the last section is regional coordination. And this talks about how regional coordination will be accomplished in a variety of different areas like transportation, water quality protection, resiliency, housing, economic growth. All of those issues are not confined by a municipal boundary line. And then the implementation plan. And so these are the specific actions that will take place to achieve the objectives that have been laid out. Talks about a capital improvement plan. It'll be a 10-year capital improvement plan. How the implementation is intended to be approached. It gives some instruction on how the implementation plan overview, what the actions are, what the related objectives are, what group will be responsible for the achievement of that implementation. It lays out timeframes in the short term, 0 to 2 years, medium term, 3 to 5 years, and long term, 6 to 10 years. And then some items, of course, are ongoing on an annual basis. It sets out a performance metric. So what does it look like? How do you know you achieved the action? And in some areas, it suggests some possible funding sources beyond just local property taxes or local revenue. So this is a longer section, and we get down to the actual matrix. You can see the matrix laid out there. The first, again, starts with future land use. And you can see there's enumeration, so you know which goal, policy, and objective we're referring to. Also shows others that may be related to that section. Outlines a responsible group. Gives you that timeline. Matt, I'm sorry.
Just a quick, I think this is a comment that Tim made earlier. Is it possible to hyperlink those related objectives? Like just put little anchors in so that you can easily go between one or the other.
And we'll also add the headers too on the pages so you know.
Lauren, just editing T431 under transportation. I think city manager is listed twice as a responsible group. I think it's supposed to be maybe the airport manager and the city manager might be what was supposed to be.
Oh, yeah, for the airport ones, we just had city manager. So I put it twice.
Yeah, city manager's in there twice.
You're doing it twice.
I counted, there's over 60 city manager tags in here.
Technically, you should be on all of them, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to make it a little easier for you.
What she's suggesting is for those objectives where it's listed twice, you're working late nights.
Okay, good.
They gave you a moment of pause after you saw that.
Also, just as we were just talking right now, it hit me. How stable do you expect your group's names to be over the next 10 years? Is it reasonable to assume that I mean, I don't know what the fix is, but some kind of cross-reference might need to be developed at some point down the road if names start changing or groups start getting condensed or split apart or whatever.
I can say we're 5 years in with the ones that are in here currently, but I think you're absolutely right. There's some that I already anticipate maybe some changes coming, so we probably need to address that before we do the final revision.
We're going to add in a sentence too, to the implementation beginning of it to make a note of that. Be aware of changes.
Yeah. Dana?
One way to address that possibly is to have a, with the city's org chart, to have an accountabilities matrix. So DeCarlo might be accountable for housing, but maybe it's really not. Maybe it's, I don't know, whoever. Maybe it's Glenn, you know. And so just to list like whoever's accountable for the different sections, and then say in here, you know, the person responsible for this is whoever's accountable for whatever.
Dana, we're going to hire you, I think.
Well, I also noticed here, just so, Phil, you won't think you were being picked on, I see planning and permitting has quite a few sections.
Just a couple.
As a responsible group. Maybe the same thought might have come across your mind, but as I read through these things and the length of them, it suggests to me some consideration about looking about staffing capacity here, because this adds to an already existing workload.
We're highly efficient.
Okay. All right. Not that I'm trying to suggest who you're doing it, but, you know, the question may come up, you know, can we accomplish these tasks? Hopefully so.
I think the previous meeting, there was some discussion regarding the city manager work plan with the council. And I think that's going to be a great reference document of pulling these sections and ensuring on a quarterly basis the status of, especially these short term, as we move to the mid-range.
Yeah, hopefully it provides a real opportunity for that kind of discussion at the policy. And, Bilal.
So just switching gears here. So I'm looking at T3.1.3
What
under
page?
policy 3.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 162. And
160?
162. Yeah.
62, okay.
Mhm. So I'm reading this, amend ordinance, year-round usability, including provisions for enhanced maintenance of brick, uneven or ice-prone materials, and alternatives to sidewalks constructed entirely of brick. So I'm not sure the intention of, like, are we moving towards maintaining brick and keeping brick, or are we looking for alternatives of brick, or if there was a reason for having that kind of, you know?
Yeah, that's a regular conversation, and it happened today. You know, because we are, if you've been on the Riverwalk, you've seen the brick replacement that's taking place behind the Hilton. And then there was discussion, do we need the brick that goes to Great Falls Plaza Road from the Riverwalk, or could that just be asphalt? So it's being evaluated, it's being reviewed with what was adopted in the plan to ensure that we're not conflicting with what was approved. But that is done on a regular basis. I think if you take a look at, High Street and Court Street, when a vehicle kind of took out part of one of the buildings there, the discussion, it had to be replaced, that entire curb, and we decided to go back with brick because that's what was there, and that was part of that plan. So, but that is constantly being evaluated. So, but I think we also look for alternatives like the one that we're looking at over at Great Falls Plaza right now, because we believe that alternative can happen. It's a regular transition from the road, but it's a major cost saving, and because of the amount of salt that's being used on that road, we replaced like 130 some odd pavers, brick pavers that were on that section. that's not sustainable as we move forward if there's an opportunity for us to make a different enhancement. But it's constantly being discussed.
Notice that on the river walk, because it's like individual bricks that are being replaced too,
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense.
And, trying to keep some sort of aesthetic aspect of it as well. Sometimes the least expensive, not necessarily long-term. I won't go through all of these because there's a lot of them here. Why don't I just see if there's other thoughts or questions? Dana?
Yeah, maybe it's a little bit outside of the scope of this, but thinking back to the previous discussion John brought up about staffing and capacity, it seems like it would be in order to have at any given time a stacked rank priority list of what we really need to accomplish. There's always going to be stuff that is constant. We always need to do the numbers 1, 2, and 3, but then it would probably make sense to have like a regular, like a yearly checkup with the city council and say, going forward into this year, give me your top 10 priorities or whatever it is, and just have that continually updated, just so that we're making sure that we're not letting anything fall that really needs to be done.
I think one of the ideas of this being very thorough with it is to initiate conversations like that, which I think would be natural conversations.
Yeah, I think, John, you've referenced it several times throughout this process, that this plan's not something that sits on a shelf.
Right.
I see it as an active document that the council will be readily reviewing with staff using as a tool for identifying future grants, funding. We're looking forward to this because this is a great roadmap for us. It's a real clear picture, and we can start building, I think, a sustainable time frame for beginning this work, noting that sometimes you have to wait for the right, the stars to align with certain funding or a developer or whatever that might be, but you have it in the queue and you're ready to go when the opportunity presents itself.
And as you indicated, administrative staff has had an opportunity to have input in here.
Absolutely.
So, this is something they've seen and made constructive suggestions, which some of the things were we either don't have the authority or we can't do it. So some things have already been weeded out, but in the future as well. Tim?
Thank you. Along this conversation, I really appreciate and just wanted to highlight that under performance metric, maybe all, or certainly all, nearly all, if not all, it says an annual or some periodic update to the city council. And but Lauren, you had mentioned that you'd put in at the beginning of this section some of the material, some of the items in here may change over 10 years. It might be worth highlighting why those are in there, that there's an intentional thought process here, right? That we put these objectives together, and prioritization or funding can ebb and flow in terms of the timing of that. So it makes sense that you build it into the current structure of the city and the management of the governance of the city, so people just, it clicks for them that that's why it's there, and that process is intentional to make this a living document, a working document. So any other related stuff, I think it's worth highlighting just to remind those of us that haven't been in it, or like me tonight going, oh yeah, it's right there, who have been in it, that you've built those things in.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, I think what Phil touched on and Tim just touched on, that as a counselor, I really think this part of the plan is great because it keeps it from being a concept sort of manual to actually, this is how you implement this plan. We had these ideas and we have mapped out how we can realize them. And, you know, to Tim's point, I think it's up to the council to work with staff to make sure that progress keeps being made there, so.
Sorry, John, one final thought. Phil, you've mentioned it in the past, but perhaps it's important to make sure it's woven in as a reminder that there's a plan to extend the CIP to meet a broader time frame. And that's to the same kind of objective, right? It's to give us a better ability to prioritize, make adjustments over time.
We're framing out the new CIP document and the framework of that, which will include a section if it ties back to the comprehensive plan. So the council will know that's tied back to T3.12. And so that's why that's listed in here as a priority.
Other thoughts about the implementation section? There's an appendices, and the appendices, there's a glossary section to help those who are using the document to know what was meant by particular activities or particular phrases like active transportation, ADA accessibility. Provides a resource for folks to know the vocabulary that's used. Appendix B includes related plans and studies. They're organized by city plans. You can see there's quite a long list of those. Regional plans and state plans. So this provides a resource to look back to where other information that may be useful going forward can be referred to. And the section, I think, that doesn't have all of the appendices, but one of the appendices as well as all of the detailed information regarding the community engagement. So all of that is there for folks seeing this plan, working with it, and see what the public, at least at this time, this moment in time, had in mind for the long-term vision of the community. Is there any further comments on the comprehensive plan? Allow.
Yeah, so I just want to make a comment about kind of the introduction part that we went over. We don't have to go back to it, but I noticed that a lot of the kind of history, I mean, we know Auburn's history is very vast. I mean, we had, almost 200 years, a couple of years back in 2019. But I think it would make sense to kind of pay homage to the native people and the native land before the white settlers and before kind of the 1869, and just paying homage to that. I mean, the Androscoggin River, the history of the people with the Androscoggin, I think, we all know Androscoggin means, in the Wabanaki language, has a particular meaning about the fish in the river and that connection to the land that really this whole plan should be about, and so grounding it in that, I think, makes sense.
I'm thinking somewhat too, brought a thought to my mind, the next section, an additional section, Auburn going forward. It might be useful in that section to recognize that there's a lot of diversity going forward in this community, and many others. People from different background, ethnicities, people of different color. Gives some sense that going forward, the community is growing and changing as well. Leave that with you to give some thought to that. Okay?
Yeah, this is kind of a related comment. I mean, you folks had collected such a mass of information about who we are that went into that, that initial phase of the work. And so when your description of Auburn, or our description right now of Auburn today seems very thin to me, and I actually wondered if it was worth adding something about, you have total city population, but there's a way in which that really doesn't tell you very much about the kinds of changes that are such a rich part of who we are and who will be in the future. So if there's just a way to say a little bit about changing demographics, I think issues about age and, national identity and educational status and all those things were part of what we gathered at the beginning, and they might have, I think they've had an impact on how we've gone through this process. So if there's, and I know you don't want to upload a huge amount of data and graphs and stuff, but a little bit might help get at some of this, a more nuanced picture of the city.
Riley?
I had a question going back to the glossary. So we were saying how we didn't want to have anything described in the agricultural use that would preclude or exclude anything that currently exists or we would like to exist. Is the definitions in the glossary the same way? Because on the planning board, we're going through and changing definitions in our ordinance. Does the ordinance definition have to meet okay.
Yeah, great question. It does not need to meet it. Just when you are adopting new zoning provisions or regulations, it has to be consistent with this plan. So the wording does not have to match verbatim. It just needs to meet a consistency.
I'm assuming I'm sorry, I just started talking. I didn't raise my hand. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I was wondering, when you're doing the executive summary, coming back to the question of how many different languages are spoken in Auburn and how some of this might be available in different languages. I just went to the city page and you can, it's amazing. You can get a gazillion languages telling us about the city of Auburn, right? So I assume that if this goes on the city's webpage, that you could do something similar, like with the executive summary. I'm just wondering how someone in the city whose English might not be primo and wants to read up a little bit, how they would access it.
That's a great question, Jane. I think with the PDF of the plan itself, translating it into multiple different languages, there's a lot of context that have gone into our conversations. So that would be challenging and time consuming, but that's something that we can explore. I know we talked about language translation in our implementation table. With an executive summary that's a few pages, we can look into ways to make that translatable. In terms of the 500-page document, I'm not quite sure.
Partly I'm just wondering about whatever it does. I just looked at the head page, the main page for the city, and if I click on Russian, I immediately get it in Russian or French or Ukrainian or whatever. And I don't know how deep into the page that, in, subpages that will work, and whether that would actually give you the executive summary. Just,
We can look at how other larger cities do it as well, that have had diverse populations for an extended period of time, like New York City and Chicago, and see what they do with their planning documents.
Yeah, I think if you made, this is another case for making a page for the comprehensive plan that's outside of a PDF. I mean, the city's website, it has the capability to translate on the fly. Now, it doesn't, the contextual translation might not be there, but if you were to put this on just part of a page, if it's just text, then that translation should work just out of the box.
Nicolo.
Yeah, and as we go forward, technological capabilities will increase with language models. Just from my background of being with translators in different languages. So you can see these advancements are happening very, very quickly. We have a lot to say about AI, but that's the basis of AI is LLMs, and that's actually what they're really good at, is actually identifying language and translating those into others. And so as we find new tools, we can find new possibilities.
Bill.
When Bilal was talking about some of the equity components, I just wanted to go in and make sure that our equity policy was listed under the appendix, and it is under Appendix B. But when you get to Appendix B, there's no hyperlinks within that section. Will there be, so we can jump to it? Because that's a big section. There's a lot of items in there. And I'm almost wondering if maybe some of that is not all, the header on that Appendix B is related plans and studies, but that would be a policy. So we might want to pull that and actually have in a separate appendix that just highlights policies. So, and that might come to some of the ag use policies that we have that are separate, and farmland use, all that might be a good reference for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things that you see frequently with this hyperlinking from plans is most or all of the links are dead. It's going to be a 10-year period. If we're going to link to things in here, the city should get a static copy and maintain it in a directory that we have control over, so people don't get frustrated 2 years down the road looking for this stuff and you get an error when you click on it.
Man familiar with computer and that, or in your previous life?
Well, and to add to that, sometimes it's the choice of saying, let's take it to the header of the policy section on the web page, and someone can then search for the specific policy as opposed to the specific policy. Yeah, so some of those things could be really thought through. I think overall, I just want to compliment this committee, but particularly our staff and our consultants. This is a phenomenal document, and I just the number of hours of thought that's gone into this is just, well, I think we've lost track of it a long time ago, but the value is, as MasterCard would say, is priceless. This is a really, really great document. So thank you all for putting together something that's so readable and well thought through.
Yeah, I would underline that as well. Committee members here put in lots of time. Not all of it at the committee meeting, but in subcommittees and the like. And staff has done a phenomenal job. Administration has done a great job of supporting this comprehensive plan. Very much appreciated. And I'd like to believe the community will be pleased when they see the product that we've created. Is there more? Let's see. I don't know if we want to touch on next meetings coming up. I'm thinking September 9th is probably, well, let me rephrase this. We have a timeline. We have to, one of the things that's important is a 30-day public notice. From the time this committee says we adopt this plan and we're sending it to the planning board, the clock starts ticking, 30-day notice. So we actually have to take formal action to do that. So unless you want to do that tonight, we would need to do it probably on September 9th. Sort of bring all the any outstanding pieces together on the 9th and see if we're ready, if this committee is ready to adopt the plan.
John, I can add some context or maybe some, I don't know, thoughts to this decision. We can take what the committee's talked about. I know one pressing conversation is what the agricultural, open space, recreation, land use category. That's something that the committee would like to see. If that is, and there's other edits as well that we've talked about tonight, if those, the committee would feel comfortable with the agricultural piece, we can get confirmation from SNRB and work with them on a land use category description, and then make the other edits based on this conversation. And the committee can say tonight, with the edits that we've talked about, with the confirmation from SNRB, with that land use category description, we feel comfortable taking that action. But we can also do it on September 9th.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'd caution the committee not to do that. The committee should not take any action until the final document is in front of them with whatever edits have been made. So to John's point about the schedule, to stay on the schedule that we currently have, the committee would have to approve this before the 14th of September to make the 30-day notice for the already posted public hearing. So I understand what Lauren's trying to do, but I think we should get all the edits, even if it's a short meeting on the 9th, and we have the document, and there'll then be clarity of what the committee's approving, and not that we're approving this, but there may be some other things change, but we haven't seen them yet.
Is that enough time to get those edits and out to the committee?
There might be a few, like the hyperlinking and the indexing in the implementation table, that would take substantially more time. And so, but with the other edits that we talked about. So the committee votes on September 9th, takes action. We have a few days, the 30 days starts once we post that notice. So it's not that exact night. But it would be have to be September 14th by that day.
Yeah, so I don't think graphical changes are an issue, right? I think it's about the content of the plan. Any actual amendment to the content should be done before we vote on it. If you're still working on the headers and stuff in the layout, personally, I don't see that as a problem.
I agree. Same goes with hyperlinks. Like those are really great for the final document, but I think we're really, really close, and I'm fine waiting till the 9th, but I guess I would also encourage all of us that if there is anything, if you read back through this and there's anything really big, that we make sure we're getting it to the team before then, so there can be communication out, so that on the 9th, what I would propose and love to see is that this truly is more, okay, we've talked through these edits, these are the edits that have been made, let's look at those edits and say we're good with those, and anything we haven't said we need to change is already good. Just a general approach. So,
Ally?
If the committee does have any feedback on anything related to text edits, substantial changes, not just design pieces, we would need those by the end of day, Friday this week, so that we can incorporate those into the document that you will see for the meeting on the 9th. Once we have that, we'll finish any of the text pieces, and then our designer will work on the document Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week to turn around to all of you ahead of the meeting on the 9th.
Dana?
I'm just looking at the schedule here. So after the 9th, the city council has a meeting on the 14th, and then there's a public hearing. There's a few other meetings, and there's a final approval, we'll say December. At what point would any changes, or at what point would we need to convene again to discuss anything once we've passed this document on to planning board and city council?
Well, one of the times that we may need to meet is we're going to have public hearing. And the intent of the public hearing is to have public make some input. Now, depending on what that public input is, if information or issues were raised that the committee felt needed to be addressed, then we're going to have to take a meeting to do that.
So I would imagine we would need to vote on that. Would that be a vote during the public hearing?
No.
So Dana's raised a really important point here, and I think that there's been a lot of internal discussion about this, about the council and the planning board process and the interaction with this committee. I think where we've arrived is that in the process, if there are not substantial changes, it could be grammatical errors or minor changes in the language that don't substantively change the plan at the planning board, the public hearing, the city council. The practice has been to allow those. I think that as we go through this, if we get feedback from any of these bodies that it's an actual substantial change to the plan, it has to loop back to this committee for the committee to weigh in and say, okay, this is how we agree, we don't, this is how we think it should change. So I know we might not all have picked up on this, but I think Lauren sort of raised this a couple times, which is this schedule as if everything goes through and flows well, and no one along the way in any of the multiple steps going forward raises a flag and says, oh, this isn't right, or we missed that, we got to loop it back. If we do, we'll have to then amend the schedule based on what occurs.
Dana?
So I guess at what point would there be a change big enough to necessitate a new public hearing and to kick off the process?
Yeah, sort of the same threshold if it's substantive. There's a bit of a difference under the state statute. The 30-day notice only applies to this initial hearing. If we go through and we have a substantive change and we loop back through, we're going to have another public hearing, but we only need to meet the same notice provisions that we do for the council or the planning board, which is, I think, 2 or 3, 2 business days, 2 days. So we can have more of an expedited schedule if we're just making modifications.
Lauren?
So at the October 14th public hearing, people will come and give their comment, and then the committee will discuss that evening those comments. And if it all goes well and there's nothing substantive that we need to meet again, the committee that night will take action to send the plan to the planning board. The planning board will be at the public hearing so they can get public comment. And so at that stage, that's the action so you'll take action on the 9th to open for public comment. Then you'll take action again on the 14th if you don't hear a substantial comment from the public to send to the planning board. And then the planning board workshops and then moves to council.
Just to add on to that, the planning board doesn't send the plan back to you all. They send their official recommendations over to the council, and the council decides X, Y, and Z. And the planning board, it's already gotten an early look at this document, and they will be discussing the document and the future land use map at their meeting this week on the 27th. And so we're providing them a lot of time. So they're not seeing it for the first time on the 14th in October. It's intended for, okay, these other bodies and these members of the public are going to be seeing, has multiple chances to see the document before we get to just the public hearing, so they can provide this information to you as a body, and so you can address, some substantive comments if they occur. So essentially, we're trying to say we're trying to act in a way that there's no surprises at the 14th, at least internally from these boards that have a chance to look at the document.
And the September 14th joint presentation with the City Council and the Planning Board would be a helpful time too for the public to learn about the plan and learn about the different sections. We're going to be walking through how to interact with the plan, the process, and so on. And that will kick off the 30-day comment period. And so I would encourage people in your neighborhoods and community and so on to watch that meeting, attend that meeting, to kind of observe if they're like, whoa, how do I give comment on this document? That might be a good stepping stone for them.
Lauren, tomorrow you and I'll send out a text message, email to all of the members in regards to what Ally said, when comments need to be done so that we can have all of those addressed by our September 9th meeting. Further questions? Schedule? Don't think there's anything else on the agenda. Pleasure of the committee to have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you all.